In 2019, Goldberg almost killed The Undertaker in the ring for real. This match was a disaster that earned him to be renamed Oldberg and made people forget about the megastar he was in the 90s. And if I told you that, in reality he was supposed to be retired at that moment, would you be shocked? 2 years earlier, he had a perfect end to his career, after an adventure full of doubts, changes and love. It's a pleasure to meet you on the Wrestling Paradise to dive into the comeback of a legend to the WWE in 2016 and see together how the fairy tale turned into a nightmare.
Maybe for the one time in my wrestling career, this ain't about me.
You will learn, among other things, why he made the tremendous decision to return to pro wrestling after a 12-year absence, why he was hated in the locker room in 2003, but also the completely unlikely moment with Rusev that almost ruined everything, and even why his performance against Brock Lesnar at the 2016 Survivor Series was historic. And you'll never guess what he called Vince McMahon while they seem to have finally made peace with each other. You are on the Wrestling Paradise, from Goldberg to Oldberg, the most bizarre ending of a wrestler's career. Let's go. Goldberg never thought he would return to the ring one day. The man who was one of World Championship Wrestling's big stars in the 90s thought that his short period in the WWE between 2003 and 2004 would be the bottom line for him. And yet, from 2016, the man who once had a legendary unbeaten streak came back to pro wrestling, for better or for worse, as you will see. It all started in the fall of 2016. In this era, when the WWE was refreshing its shows, the fans had a pleasant surprise for the release of the Federation's annual video game. A wrestler was making his return in the game there, despite having been absent for many years. You got it? It was Bill Goldberg. During the promotion of WWE 2K17, he even confided that all this made him ask himself questions he hadn't asked himself for a long time. Would the virtual world have been assigned to the real one? Was he really coming back to the Stanford Company 12 years later? First of all, you must be fully aware of who we are talking about. He's not just any wrestler. This is a man who was a real megastar in the 90s. In this global context where WCW and WWE were battling each other in front of nearly 10 million viewers every week, he had made a very big impact. I must admit that his entrance impresses me a lot.
What a phenomenon!
Intense, huge pyro.
Someone would knock on the door, and then he would appear, sometimes with his forehead cut open after having deliberately hit his head. With a majestic and powerful music, we could see this phenomenon arriving from backstage, escorted by security or the police. Then he would put himself in the middle of the pyro that he received on him without any fear. Like a dragon, he let out smoke from his mouth and then unleashed wildly. With such a physique and this intensity, he looked like a mercenary who was coming to the ring to kill his next target. He destroyed all his opponents one by one, to a point where his unbeaten streak was known to everyone. Goldberg had shriveled Hulk Hogan and even became World Heavyweight Champion. When he arrived in the WWE, Goldberg was resuming his path of destruction even more beautifully. From his beginnings, he beat The Rock in 2003, one of the company's biggest stars. After being World Heavyweight Champion once again, his story in Vince McMahon's empire didn't end very well. At WrestleMania 20, he challenged a certain Brock Lesnar in a match refereed by Stone Cold Steve Austin. The two men were booed because the spectators knew they were leaving the company. However, Goldberg defeated the Beast incarnate. Remember this information well, because it will become very important very soon. Indeed, in 2016, Bill was making our mouths water.
I beat him once.
Who's to say you couldn't do it again?
When he was asked which current superstars he wanted to face, he mentioned Brock Lesnar, who was one of WWE's biggest names at that time. We are talking about a former UFC World Champion, who had ended The Undertaker's iconic streak at WrestleMania and who had killed John Cena's aura all by himself in 2014. In 2016, Brock had absolute legitimacy, being almost invincible. Since the day he shocked the world at WrestleMania 30 by beating the dead man, no one had pinned him to defeat him. On the other hand, also taking into account his period in the WWE between 2002 and 2004, Goldberg was perhaps the only stain in Lesnar's pro wrestling career. Could a dream match be in the works? Would Brock Lesnar succeed in vanquishing the dragon he has never beaten before? All these questions could arouse the enthusiasm of the fans. Will we have answers very soon? Hold on tight. In October 2016, everything was going to become very real. At that moment, we must realize that Goldberg was no longer the same man. First of all, just before a potential comeback in the fall of 2016, he was 49 years old. He is therefore no longer in his prime like in the 90s. He is now a veteran in this business. Was this age and his 12-year inactivity in the ring going to be a factor? How would he be in the same performance standards as in his golden age, no longer having the same physical form? Wasn't he risking to hurt his legacy and tarnish his reputation forever? That was the whole problem for Bill. But he definitely wanted to share this with his wife and son. The two most important people in his life don't know anything about this whole part of him. The world of pro wrestling is completely foreign to them, while Bill was nevertheless one of its biggest stars, and that this universe meant a lot in his life.
It should be fun. And you never know what's going to happen.
In any case, October 17th, 2016 was the big day. He had made the decision to return to the sports entertainment world, with these two people ready to rediscover Bill from another angle. The WCW legend introduced his relatives to the various employees. For him too, it was something unprecedented and destabilizing. He hardly knew anyone anymore. The company was completely different to 2004. Triple H was one of the few people he knew. 13 years before, they were rivals in the ring. But that day, it was Triple H who spoke with Goldberg about the entrance he wanted to do, production, how he felt about this whole event. The game will tell that it wasn't easy at all for Bill. You should know that Goldberg's last period in the company wasn't exactly a fairy tale. Bill was someone who didn't really mix with other wrestlers. He would arrive, often stay alone, do what he had to do, and then leave. In the eyes of some of his colleagues, this made him an arrogant person, a jerk with a big ego. Listen to what he said about his relationship with his colleagues during his first run in the WWE.
There's a grand disdain for me because I wasn't one of their boys. I didn't have to fraternize and just play that game.
So taking these elements into consideration, we say to ourselves, will things go better this time? Did some colleagues hold grudges against him? Goldberg himself had kept a very bitter taste for sports entertainment when he left it in 2004. There was not only the end of WrestleMania 20, but also the politics behind the scenes, colleagues and fans who didn't like him. According to Eric Bischoff, the former WCW head of creative who also went to Stanford, Goldberg never felt at home in this company at the time. Let's not forget that the war with WCW was experienced intensely by many wrestlers in the past. Could they easily forget all this and welcome the biggest star of their former enemy with open arms? In any case, we can say that this match against Brock Lesnar at the Showcase of the Immortals in 2004 was like a metaphor for Goldberg's last contacts with wrestling, and they weren't really pretty to see. It was necessary to put aside all this bitterness to turn the page of his bad experiences. In a certain way, at the dawn of his return, Goldberg had to win back the fans and more generally the entire pro wrestling universe, while making his loved ones proud and being worthy of what he could have been about 15 years ago. Not an obvious mission, is it?
It's a different time, it's a different place, and I'm in a different place.
He was talking to his new colleagues, he was opening up to a new generation. He greeted them all with respect. The old Goldberg that some people saw as a diva seemed far away in 2016. We will note a little sentence he said to one of them that may shock us.
I never have, but hopefully this time I will.
Has he never had fun in the ring? Was he never fulfilled in wrestling? For what reason? Too much at stake, too much pressure, too much stress? Hang in there, because these mysteries will eventually be clarified.
Business, business, business. It didn't seem like there was a lot of warmth there between Bill and myself.
You sure you want to go there?
There was also a certain Vince McMahon in this story. According to the former WWE boss, his relationship with Goldberg was not the best in 2003 to 2004. Apparently, it was purely professional, without anything human. The two men needed a frank conversation where they told each other everything without any restraint. Their relationship was evolving. They were trying to bury the hatchet and definitely move forward again. Goldberg and Vince McMahon were trusting each other again, and there was a need for it. But we could even go even further. Did Goldberg enter the circle of the boss's favorite wrestlers during this period? For better or for worse, Vince always had certain superstars whom he liked to put forward more than others. Of course, it was necessary to earn that spot first, but you will see that with Goldberg we will be able to wonder if Vince didn't put him forward too much. But hey, this wasn't on the agenda yet. It was time to make a comeback, and in hindsight, it was going to be thunderous. These images are real. On October 17, 2016, Goldberg had indeed returned to the WWE to officially answer Brock Lesnar's challenge. 12 years later, it was time to write a new chapter. What could we hope for the veteran? A one-shot match against Brock in which he could make his wife and son proud. What was the Federation preparing for us with Bill? What is certain is that we felt an emotional Goldberg to be so well received by the public. He thanked them insistently. After all, let's keep in mind that his last interactions with wrestling fans had been insults, hatred. Now he was happy to feel invested spectators who cared about him. We imagine that this gave him an extra confidence that he would strongly need for the future.
Brock Lesnar, not only does that mean that you're next, you're last!
So it was decided. Bill was going to put his boots back on to face Brock Lesnar. We will notice that he tells him that he will not only be next but also last. Was the plan to just do one match for Goldberg and then officially retire? Anyway, it was like a dream for him. He was very well received, in a very emotional moment for him. It was great to see him take his son on his shoulders and go to shake hands with all his fans. The past was really far behind. His wife, who said that she usually never cried, was even very emotional. She could see her husband smiling, with tears in his eyes, experiencing something intensely. Anger had been replaced by gratitude.
To see Bill talk about wrestling and smile, be excited, and it to be an entirely different emotion.
The veteran described this experience of his comeback as the coolest thing of his career. This moment impacted him a lot. He is a family man now. This responsibility is the most important new thing in his life today. So we can only imagine even more his emotion on this evening in October 2016. On a daily basis, he says that he plays a lot with his son. Several times a week, he trains him and his buddies in flag football. At home, his son has an action figure of his father. Seeing their beautiful relationship, we understand that Goldberg didn't want his son to watch his final match one day, and that this experience against Brock Lesnar in 2004 is what he remembers. It is nevertheless incredibly symbolic that it is still Brock Lesnar, 12 years later, that he can clean up the past with and change this image that people kept of him. In wrestling, he had long been perceived as a superhero by children. Today, he wanted to be this superhero for his son.
Maybe for the one time in my wrestling career, this ain't about me.
But he was going to experience doubt. Was he wrong to come back to wrestling? Wasn't he completely rusty? How to avoid the catastrophe of being only a shell of his former self? He describes all these moments as almost mentally unbearable. The closer he was from his return to the ring, the more unbearable he became for others. It wasn't just a matter of being more and more stressed. To be this destructive animal, he could not be this kind family man that he had become. The human had to let the machine come in. For him, this process was anything but fun now. The fear of looking like a fool in the ring in front of millions of people was huge. This fear was legitimate given this first physical interaction since his return. Has he slipped because he is indeed not as good now, or has this excess of pressure he put on himself made him less good? Anyway, when it came time to prove to the whole world and to this Rusev guy that he wasn't rusty, he fell. After that, he was angry about it. He had succeeded in martyring his rival with his iconic jackhammer. But it hadn't been perfect. Perfectionist as he is, Goldberg couldn't be happy about that. Was he going to make other mistakes that will ridicule him in the following weeks? It would only take a stupidity, another slip, a poorly executed move to tarnish his reputation for eternity. Do you realize what's at stake for Bill? It is at the Survivor Series show that this long-awaited match against Brock Lesnar will take place. In the period leading up to it, Goldberg trains hard in his weight room, at home. He devotes every minute of his time to putting himself in condition to be the best possible. Every day he goes beyond his limits, lifts more weights, does more rounds. With demanding so much for himself, it was impossible for him to be relaxed, as he confides. He has committed to Vince McMahon to put up this epic match. He must be up to the task. Error is forbidden.
I don't joke when I say this. He will not sleep until that is done.
He doesn't just have to look like a force of nature physically, an intimidating monster. He must be able to jackhammer Brock Lesnar, a 280-pound man. He must look like a bodybuilder and be very athletic at the same time, be explosive, elite liveliness, and a strength. He does bodybuilding, Muay Thai. His biggest issue is to gain muscle mass at the same time as being on top of his game cardio-wise. To be as massive as possible, he must consume a lot of calories and have multiple gym sessions. But he must be mobile at the same time, which in parallel burns a lot of calories, which could prevent him from gaining mass. He recognizes that he has to deal with multiple problems. He does 3 workouts a day, 6 times a week. All that without sleeping. As Survivor Series approaches, he is in a race against time to be at his best on time. A few days before the show, he confronts Brock Lesnar in the ring. But here, another problem is added to the list. Hold on tight. In this scene where he destroys one by one the security guards who separated him from Brock, he injures his shoulder. It seems like every time Goldberg is in the ring, something goes wrong. He didn't expect to do a clothesline over the top rope to this guy. What is certain is that he has been putting his body to the test for weeks. We come to seriously wonder if this match against Lesnar is not going to be a much worse disaster than in 2004. Will the Goldberg plane explode in midair? Look at that intensity in this entrance. We understand this idea of becoming this machine even better by seeing him in this state. The smiling and grateful family man gave way to another version of himself, an animal. The match is not going to be what we might have expected at all. The backlash is going to be radical. The shock is going to be tremendous. In just a few minutes, and in a one-sided match, Goldberg victimized Brock Lesnar. He succeeded what nobody else had done to the Beast incarnate yet. All these years later, he is still Brock's kryptonite, more than ever. In front of his family, he proved that he was still this phenomenon. Can you only imagine that he just shriveled the most dominant man in WWE for his big comeback? In the ring, he can celebrate with his son, a new beautiful scene. We can clearly feel it. If Goldberg has been getting into all this stuff for weeks, it is to offer these kinds of moments to his son. Tonight at Survivor Series, Gage Goldberg was able to watch his father as a superhero. He was able to experience what wrestling fans had been able to experience even before he was born. In 1 minute and 26 seconds, the veteran gave Lesnar his most humiliating defeat. Once this long-awaited match at Survivor Series was done, everything was better for Goldberg. He was relieved that he had managed to live up to it. He could thank the fans for enabling him to be that character again. It felt like he was bowing out for good now. Unless he was caught by the wrestling bug. Was he really going to settle for just one match? Didn't this newfound confidence deserve a few more appearances in the ring?
With 6 weeks, this is what you got. Wait till you see when you got 16 weeks.
Indeed, Bill had a strong point. With a much longer preparation, it would necessarily be even better. That's what the WWE officials must have told themselves. At the beginning of 2017, we saw him in the Royal Rumble, where he was going to eliminate Brock Lesnar, of whom he truly is the toughest enemy. Then on March 5th, 2017 at Fastlane, it was time for Bill to have a new singles match, and not just anyone. A few weeks before WrestleMania, he was taking on the Universal Champion, Kevin Owens. To the delight of his son in ringside, he completely killed the Canadian, even if we note that the latter was distracted by his former best friend, Chris Jericho. He was not only back in the WWE, but now he had one of the most important belts. He was becoming the most important name on Monday Night Raw. For him, it was great to offer this victory to his loved ones. They could experience the world of pro wrestling as closely as possible, even more than they probably imagined. Seeing his 10-year-old son hold this title, we can only be happy for him. So you will have understood it. Bill was still going to have one match at the most important show of the year. Lesnar against Goldberg at WrestleMania 33 for the Universal Belt. It was time to bury the WrestleMania 20 disaster for good 13 years later. Bill was able to digest this bad memory, reflect and find the determination to offer something better to the fans.
And I'm gonna have fun. Yeah. I like ever enjoyed the moment.
So for the first time, Goldberg was in the moment. He took the time to enjoy the process and have fun, which he had never done in his entire career. In a way, the machine has become humanized. That day, it was like a victory for him. He no longer had that pressure that almost prevented him from breathing. For him, the story is about to end, and he is satisfied with the manner. He was able to win a title in front of his son. Now, all he had to do was erase that bad memory from 2004 by finally having a positive experience at the grandest stage of them all.
Win, lose, or draw, man, I'm going out on my shield, brother. I'm having fun.
We finally felt an enthusiastic Goldberg and happy to be there. There was no longer all this pressure that he was putting on himself, this stress, this permanent concentration. He no longer suffers, he is having fun. Finally, he is in the moment. The match itself will be different from the one at Survivor Series. Another story was being told. After all this time, Brock Lesnar had to defeat his final boss, and he will succeed. he will dodge a spear from Bill in a very nice way. The confrontation was intense, brutal. We had spears, a jackhammer, suplexes, and finally the F5 of the Beast. Brock had finally defeated his old enemy who had returned to annoy him, but the main thing was elsewhere. Goldberg had accomplished his mission. His relatives were happy and proud. He was relieved. The day after WrestleMania 33, he could cut a nice human promo where he talked about his life to the fans and offer another unforgettable moment to his son.
There is nothing that anyone on the planet can do to take that away from me and I.
His son was more proud of his father than ever. He had even been able to bring the Universal title to his school. The fans accepted him and loved him. The past was cleaned up, the legacy was intact. Even if he kept the mystery a little, it clearly looked like a retirement. The end of his career was like a dream. Like a cowboy, he could get on his horse and ride into the sunset. What could happen to him now? The happy end had indeed taken place, right? In reality, Goldberg's story with the WWE was not over yet, unfortunately. A year after this perfect end of his journey, it became even better by being inducted into the Hall of Fame. This is the ultimate consecration for any wrestler. But in 2019, the bug had caught him again. He was coming back to wrestle again. Why was he not accepting this beautiful outcome? What we do know is that things have changed in the company. The Federation now has a contract with Saudi Arabia to do shows there. In exchange for a lot of money, the Federation no longer has any problem bringing its biggest stars out of retirement, such as The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. Precisely at Super Showdown on June 7th, they were setting up a dream match for the Saudis. The Undertaker against Goldberg for the first time ever. The two of them combined are 106 years old. Quite naturally, age is just a number that doesn't mean anything. But that night, it did mean something. This match will go down in history as one of the most disastrous of all time. Mistakes of all kinds, moments of discomfort. It would have been nice not to see all that. Goldberg even almost killed The Undertaker accidentally. This catastrophe will lead him to end up being nicknamed Oldberg by the fans, which emphasizes his rusty side. Is this the way Bill wanted to be remembered? Seeing him in 2016, it's hard to believe it. Anyway, he will try to redeem himself against Dolph Ziggler at SummerSlam a few weeks later. But the cup wasn't full yet. At the beginning of 2020, he was coming back again to face The Fiend on the road to WrestleMania. This fascinating character embodied by the late Bray Wyatt was Universal Champion for several months, with an aura of invincibility that he deserves so much because he was so great. But Vince McMahon made the sickening decision to make Goldberg win in less than 3 minutes. He was becoming Universal Champion again, probably, so that the fans would hate him and be happy to see Roman Reigns win this title at WrestleMania 36. But the health context upset all plans. In the end, Goldberg lost this belt in an empty performance center to Braun Strowman in an insignificant moment. According to rumors, Goldberg pushed internally to defeat The Fiend and therefore be the first to do so that his young fans could see their superhero beat this monster. In the end, The Fiend will be totally buried, while Goldberg's character had already proven everything. Fortunately, during his subsequent appearances, he will mainly be used to put other superstars over. At the 2021 Royal Rumble, Drew McIntyre will beat him in 2 minutes and 32 seconds. At SummerSlam the same year, he would lose to Bobby Lashley in another rather humiliating performance. He will avenge that against Bobby at Crown Jewel in Saudi Arabia, where he will return in February 2022 to pass out after a guillotine by Roman Reigns. Afterwards, we will never see him again, even if we must never say never in pro wrestling. In the meantime, he insulted Vince McMahon, who allegedly promised him one last retirement match without ever giving it to him. He helps his son become a professional football player. We don't know what the future is for Goldberg, but one thing is for sure. If he had really stopped in 2017, his legacy would be much better today, and that's a shame. And this is how our documentary about the end of Goldberg's career ends. From the fall of 2016 to WrestleMania 33, everything had been perfect for him. Even if he sometimes struggled behind the scenes, the past was cleaned up in the end, and his loved ones filled with pride. But possibly for money, his legacy has been massively affected. I have a debate for you. In your opinion, has Goldberg's reputation been damaged for good? Come and give your opinion in the comments. I wonder what you think about it, and in any case, it will be interesting to discuss it together. We can say that Goldberg's career is unique. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay on the Paradise of Wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?